The Mystery of BELICENA VILLCA. Second Book. The Letter of BELICENA VILLCA. 40th Day. In June 13th of 1303 was celebrated an assembly of the General States in Louvain, chaired by the King. On it were renewed the complaints against Boniface VIII, and was formally proposed the necessity to convoke a council to condemn him, and to name a new pope. The nobles, the cities, and the nationalist bishops except William of Plasian, request to be the accuser of Boniface in the future council. He is accepted too, and reads a declaration where he exposes his arguments. I, William of Plasian, knight, anticipate and affirm that Boniface, who now occupies the Holy See, will be found a perfect heretic, according to the heresies, prodigious facts and wicked doctrines as the following. First, he doesn't believe in the immortality of the soul. Second, he doesn't believe in the eternal life, because he affirms that he would prefer to be a dog, a donkey, or a brute, before a French thing that he would not say if he believes that a French has eternal soul. He doesn't believe in the real presence, because he decorates his throne with major magnificence than the altar. He has said that to humiliate His Majesty and the French, he would disrupt the whole universe. He gave his approval to the book of Arnaud de Villeneuve, the protected sorcerer of the Cistercians, who had been condemned by the bishop and the University of Paris. He erected statues of himself in the churches with the purpose to be worshipped beside the crucified. He has a familiar demon, which he calls Baphil, who reveals him what he wants to know. For this reason he said that even if the whole mankind would be placed aside, and would be only he on the other side, he can't err, either in what treats about an aspect of a fact, or only of right. He expressed in his public preach that the high priest, even putting price to all the sacraments and ecclesiastical charges, can't commit simony, which is a heresy to affirm. As a confirmed heretic, he sustains that only his own faith is the real. He qualified the French, notoriously one of the most Christian populations, of Cathars. He is a repugnant sodomite, as numerous testimonies prove it. He is also a killer. In his presence gave death to many clerics, saying to his guards, when they not reached to slay them, with the first smite, beat, beat, dally, dally. He obeyed the priests, to rate the secrets of the confessional. He doesn't watch nor vigils nor fasts. He releases philippics against the order of Dominican preachers, against the minor brothers, and the spiritual Franciscans, repeating often that they ruin the world, that they are hypocrites and false, and that nothing good would happen to those who confess before them. Trying to destroy the faith, he has conceived an old aversion against the King of France, in his hate towards the faith of the real Christ, because in France is where he is and was the splendor of the faith, the great support and example of Christianity. He raised everyone against the House of France, to England, Germany, confirming the title of Emperor to the King of Germany, and proclaiming that he did it to destroy the pride of the French people, who boasted to not be subjected to anyone concerning to the temporal things, that there was no one above his king, adding that they had lead through their wrath, and declaring that if an angel would have descended from heaven, and said that the French are not subjected neither to Boniface, nor the emperor, it would be anathema. He permitted the loss in Holy Land, employing in his personal wars and luxuries the money destined to the defense of that site. He has been recognized in public as Simonist, and moreover, as the source and base of the simony, selling benefits to the highest bidder, imposing over the church and the bishop servitude and vassalage, with the objective to enrich his family and his friends with the patrimony of the crucified, and to convert them in marquises, counts, barons. He dissolves marriages for money. He annuls the votes of the nuns. In some nights, he said that prompt he would make of all the French martyrs, or apostates. Impressed for the accusations of Plasian, all accompanied by abundant proofs, the parliamentarians convened to invite Boniface VIII to assist to the council to exert his defensa. Nevertheless, Philip IV was not in accordance with the collective approval, and he wrote personal letters for many dioceses of France. While Nogret went to Rome to notify the Pope, Willem de Plezan, escorted by a dissuasive royal troop, he visited every city in person, village, or hamlets, and he collected the signs of the statements. As was expected, almost everyone signed, when reading the letter to the king and hearing the exposition of the official accuser. Only the Cistercians, Resists and the other Benedictine orders, main refugees of the Gourlines, Citos, the Cluny, and the Temple, disapproved angrily the behavior of Philip the Fair, and manifested that there's nothing reprehensible in Boniface VIII. Instead, the University of Paris, the Dominicans of Paris and the Franciscans of Turin, declared to be in favor of the king. On mid-August, Boniface VIII published a bull in which he affirms that only the Pope is authorized to convoke a council, and he tried to defend himself from the accusations of Plezan and Nogret. At the end he wondered, how has been possible to reach to the absurd that the Cathars accused the Pope of heresy? But the spies of Philip IV informed him that the decree of excommunication of the king is being drafted and questioned the Kingdom of France. To the bull has been placed in advance the date of its emission, 7 of September of 1303. Philip IV decided to give a hand hit and capture Boniface before the publishing of his infamous resolution. He would be judged in France and formally deposed, naming in his place a French bishop of his trust. To comply with this plan he conceded white letter to Willem of Nogret, to whom he gave his own sword and said these historical words: "The honor of France is in your hands, Knight Lord." Willem of Nogret goes to Italy, accompanied only by Sire Colonnet, the most fearsome personal enemy of Boniface, and by Charles of St. Felix, a Dominicanus, who was grandson of Pedro of Crete, and Valentona of Tharsis. Nogret knew Charles since he was a child, because he was son of who was the lord of the family of St. Felix of Caraman. In Florence, the banker of the King of France gives to Nogret an important sum, due to, he had the order to provide the Gascon of whatever that could be necessary for his mission. Since their departure a lot of people added to the Ghibelline party, to give advice to the Colonnese elite lords, in the proximities of Anagni, Elatra, and Ferentino. The Pope is located in his palace of Anagni, his natal city, in the ancient pontifical state of Frosinone. The neighbor city of Ferentino, Ghibelline rival of the Gull of Anagni, in the meeting point of the conspirators. The chosen day, September 6th, that is to say, 1 day before the emission of the bull that would excommunicate Philip IV. The signalized day, in the highest secrecy, arrived a dozen of lords, sworn enemies of Boniface VIII, who were waiting since years ago a similar opportunity to take revenge. All they craved intimately an occasion to execute Boniface, due to, they considered worthless his transference to France. Ironically, Willem of Nogret shall appeal to all his authority to protect him and comply, in this manner, with the strategy of Philip the Fair. Each knight had travelled separately, accompanied by a small guard that would not awake any suspicion. To these troops were added the mercenary effectives provided by the Captain Reynolds Supino, guard of Ferentino, who sold himself to Nogret for 1,000 florins. In sum were 300 horsemen, and 1,000 infants. Such companies would be really exiguous for the enterprise that they proposed to realize, if they would not have the principle of surprise in favor, due to, neither Boniface VIII, nor his Galine followers, imagined remotely that they could be attacked in Anagni. Formed a few kilometers of distance, the battalion of Nogret seemed to have emerged from the north, and nobody in Italy could know with anticipation of its existence as to warn the Gourlines. One of the Ghibelline knights was Nicholas, from the powerful family of the Conti, whose brother Adinolfo, dwelling in Anagni, would support vital collaboration to the invaders. Through him is achieved to buy the commandant of the Papal Guard, Godfrey Bucer, for a good bag of gold, while the owner Adinolfo would be occupied to deceive the Anagnians during the attack. At midnight arrived the warriors of Christus Lucifer, in front the ancient capital of the Hermix. 2 knights carry the pennants of France and of the Church. Nicholas Conti guided them to a door in the wall that has been opened from inside, and all rush to the scream of "Die Boniface! Long life the King of France!" The horsemen, followed by the infantry, are deployed in many groups, by the narrow and declivitous carriageway. They go right whither are erected the sumptuous palaces that belonged to the cardinals and the Pope, and many churches of splendid ornamentation. The commandant of the papal guard joins, with a part of his own, to the intruder forces, and the siege to the palace of Boniface VIII begins, who scarcely disposes of a few men to resist. For one time, the history was inverted. The argument is the same, the personage is similar. Is the fight of the spirit, against the potencies of the matter, the king of the blood, against the Galene priests, of the representatives of the pact of blood, against the ones of the cultural pact. But, this time the king of blood, is who triumphs over the Galene priest, over the exterminators of the pure blood, over the crusade, proclaimers against the Hyperborean wisdom. Inside of the sumptuous residence, the pride of Boniface collapses. See him there, trembling and crying as a woman, the Galene demon, who pretended to prevail over the charisma of the king of the blood. Perhaps, he is not crying due to the tragedy, but for the future punishment that his Lord will impose him, the supreme priest Melchizedek, and the masters of the wide fraternity. The dwellers of the Anatony, to all this, aroused with the surprise that their city has been occupied by troops of the King of France. Someone makes the bell tolls calling to reunion, and all the families run towards the town square of the market. The news are overwhelming. Siari colony has come, with a battalion provided by the King of France, and surely, he will kill the Pope. Godfrey Butzer has passed to the enemy side, and the city has remained unprotected. Rapidly, in the midst of a great confusion, they name Chief Tuatanulfo Conti. He, accompanied with some neighborhoods, previously elected amongst the followers of the colonies, and the Contis, leaves to parley with the raiders. He talks with Reynolds Supino, and returns immediately. He assures with vehemence that it would be impossible to resist the Frenches, who have already looted the palaces of the cardinals. Only rests the possibility to join them, and to share the booty. Desperate, the Gluffs begins the pillage, stealing beside the Ghibellings, the cardinal and papal palace. There, artworks of incalculable value would disappear, treasures of the antiquity, a rich crockery of gold and silver. Each one takes what they want and can take with them. Some of them discover the warehouses, in charge to satisfy the exquisite palates of the cardinals, and to calm their inextinguishable thirst, and promptly the bottles pass from hand to hand. During the day, few would be the Anatonians who have not stolen, or get drunk. No one dares to walk through the streets, and the city remains under the total control of the scarcely men of Novgorod. While the nocturnal pillage took place, and the population was being entertained in that barbarous task, a feverish warrior activity emerged in the surroundings of the palace of Boniface, who, conscious that with his reduced guard, could not resist for a long time, tried to arrange an agreement with the besiegers. His legacy received the conditions: to surrender without capitulation, to lift the excommunication of Philip the Fair, to rehabilitate the colonies, and to concur as prisoner to France, to be judged in a council. When Boniface received the terms, he refuses to accept, and he remained plunged in desperation. He just dressed with the Galene papal investiture, and awaited his enemies seated in the throne. Amongst sobs of bitterness, he prayed fervently to the Creator God, to realize the miracle of his salvation, and of the plans of the wide fraternity. Could be possible, he wondered aloud, that the lords of the war could triumph over him, who is a representative of the Creator of the universe. If he, in whom he had been committed, to stop the temporal kings failed, what new misadventures would supervene later for the Galene orders, that for many centuries developed the plans of the wide fraternity? After each one of these questions he convulsed, and was evident that he would not delay to lose the reason. With the exception of 2 bishops, 1 Spaniard, and the other Italian, everyone escaped from his side as they can. Some of them were captured and killed by the men of Sierra Colonna, while others remained as hostages, because they surrendered voluntarily, amongst them his own nephew. Such news ended to depress Boniface. Finally, a window yielded and Guillaume of Novgorod and Charles of St. Felix entered, followed by a dozen of soldiers of Frontino, who stayed to a prudent distance to not be recognized by the Pope. Novgorod and Charles get nearer to the throne. Wearing the papal tiara, replica of the Egyptian crown of the swarthy Atlantean priests, with the white robe of the Levitic priests of Israel, in which is embroidered the 4-leaf clover of the Gallene priests, stylized as a Celtic cross. In his right hand sustaining the cross, symbol of the spiritual incarceration, and in the left, the keys of St. Peter, symbol of the Calicut key, with which the traitor gods of the Spirit consummated the original treason. There was seated, with his eyes burning with hate and fear, one of the wickedest men of the earth. Cathar, son of Cathar, exclaimed defiant, when he recognized Novgorod. Your lord, King of France, could not do anything against the law of Jehovah God. I am knight of the King of France, replied the Gascon, and I can assure you, detestable priest, that my lords only know and respect the law of the honor, which is the law of the Holy Spirit, of the will of the real God. Only your God Jehovah, who is a demon called Satan, to whom you obey slavishly, can oppose to the law. Damn Gallene. Now was Charles of St. Felix, or Charles of Tharsis Velta, or Charles of Tarseville, who spoke. I assure you, that the King of France will end with you, and the diabolic orders that aid you. You will never govern the world, while there be initiates as him, or Frederick II. But you have for sure still that we, the eternal warrior of Christus Lucifer, will end someday, with the chiefs of your chiefs, with the occult hierarchy of supreme priests, that maintain the uncuttered spirit chained into the slavery of the created matter. Boniface paled, and shuddered, when hearing the man of stone. Something as a halo of essential hostility emerged from such night, with an impressive intensity. What was the death of the warm life before that other death, that was intuited through his presence? What was the loss of the life, of the ephemeral joys and riches, of the power in this world, or the punishment of the supreme priest, in the other world, which produced much fear in him until then, before the abyss of the eternal death, in which the eyes of ice of the French knight sank him? Heretics! He screamed out of control, in the moment when a door fell shattered and entered in full steam a multitude chaired by Sierra Colonna, respect for who, by disposition of the unique God, must govern over the whole world. Sirrah, such mortal enemy of Boniface, reached to hear his last words, and gave him a violent slap with the iron glove, pouring out blood from his cheek. Novgorod had to contain him, to avoid him to traverse the Pope, right there with the sword. The people and the soldiers, meanwhile, were taking every valuable object that they had at hand. With the palace taken, Boniface prisoner, and the city under control, the situation was not, nevertheless, promising. One thing was, to enter in secrecy in Italy, and prepare a surprise attack, and other, leave the place taking the prisoner the Pope. Neither in Anagni, they could have remained much time if the dwellers would have discovered how small was the number of the occupant troops. In the port of Estia, was waiting for them a ship of the Anibaldi's family, allies of the colonies, but, to reach there, they would need an important reinforcements. The brothers of Sierra were in charge to conquer with 5,000 men, but they delayed, and the day September 7th elapsed in tense calm, while the Anagnians were awakening from the surprise. The next day, all continued as before, but rumors of that they had been victims of the treason, of and the hit of a few aggressors, started to circulate amongst the dwellers. The hostility started to be felt, in the form of many provocations to the soldiers of Novgorod, and promptly they realized that they would have to leave Anagni as soon as possible. Guillaume of Novgorod, Charles of St. Felix, and Sierra Colonna were deliberating about the convenience of killing Boniface or take the risk of carrying him with them, when they learned that Godfrey Butzer has passed again to the side of the Pope, and has cut them the pass to the entrance of the palace. Immediately restarted the battle, bloody this time, and the three envoys of Philip IV are obeyed to flee, leaving Boniface in the hands of the Gluffs. Days later they were in France, being approved by the great king. All what happened in Anagni is that the life of Boniface didn't serve any more to the Gallene interests, due to, he has lost irremediably the reason. 1 month after the events of Anagni, in 11 of October of 1303, he would die in Rome, finishing with him the age of the Gallene medieval domination in the Holy See, and failing the imminent fulfillment of the plans of the wide fraternity, that is to say, the world government and the synarchy of the chosen people. The high strategy of the lords of Tharsis and the Circulus Dominicanus was triumphing over the potencies of the matter. Philip IV, who appeared as the exoteric cause of the Gallenes' failure, was a Hyperborean initiate, who accomplished to the letter the esoteric guidelines of the Hyperborean wisdom. But the death of Boniface, Dr. Setonal, just signalized the beginning of the end. Was still missing to dismantle the financial infrastructure of the Templars, the germ of the synarchy of the chosen people. The crisis that broke the soul of Boniface occurred when his diabolic pride was terribly humiliated by the acts of his enemies. First the Catanograt, treating him as a subject of the King of France, and taking him prisoner in his name. Then the mysterious Charles of St. Felix, transmitting to him his frightening power, and preaching the failure of the most secret plans of the Gallene orders. These confirmed the suspicions of Bernard Cesset, the Bishop of Pamiers, that around Philip the Fair existed a conspiracy of the Sons of the Shadows. Surrounded by enemies, captured in his own palace of Anagni, bathed in cold sweats, Boniface understood later that he has underestimated Philip the Fair, and that he didn't take seriously the frequently warning advices that the monks sent to the Cistercians and the Templars. Prey of a mix of hate and terror, he felt that his soul was depressing irredeemably. Then the bandit Isiara deigned to hit him, and even to threaten him of death, while his men covered him with insults. And at last, the treason of his natal population, looting without shamelessly his palace, allying to his enemies who were the enemies of the Gallene Church, the Church of God the One, the Creator of the universe, of the God from whom he, the priest Maximus, was the living manifestation. O God One, what ingratitude the one of your people! Perhaps, such aggression of his people, for being of lesser importance, but more effective, harmed him more than the precedent offenses. And, naturally, inside of that pain, detached in highest grade the anguish of being despoiled from the gold and silver, of his art treasures of unparalleled beauty gathered in entire life of acquisitions, many of them inherited, or properties of the Gaetani's family. The weight of the failure was released without extenuations, crushing in some master Boniface. Too many feelings at once, even for a Gallene of legendary cruelty, the ones that afflicted to the Pope of 69 years old. When he was rescued by the people of Anagni, his consciousness had been situated out of the reality, and, even if many promised to return as stolen, Boniface was not in conditions to comprehend it. Mechanically, he requested to be taken to the Palace of Lateran. There the Cardinals Orsini, when checking his mental state, maintained him aparted from the Romans. With exorbitant eyes he exclaimed, "Baffalo! Baffalo! Eligmat astrofero!" In some moments of lucidity, he exploded request for vengeance against his enemies and predicted the ruin of who had betrayed him. But later his mind went obscuring, and he suffered fits of rage in which he howled, vomiting foam from his mouth, and trying to bite who were taking care of him. Finally, in 13 of October 1303, he died, converted in furious beast, complying in this manner the prophecy of Celestian V. The saint had said, "You have risen as a fox, you will reign as a lion, and you will die as a dog."